So here we are going live on the Unbound Press Facebook page for this January episode of Unbound Women, our monthly author discussion. And this month, the focus is we're talking about how to write a book. Like if you're feeling the call to write a book in 2022, we're going to be sharing our wisdom, our experience, our advice, and some encouragement around that. What it's really like to write a book. Hopefully not going to put you off too much. That's what we were just saying before we went live. For those who don't know me, I'm Nicola Humber. I'm founder of the Unbound Press and author of 3 books so far. Writing another one this year. That's part of the plan. So I'll be listening to the wisdom and the advice from my 2 guests today as well to see if anything comes through that's going to be helpful for me. I'm sure it will. Today, I'm joined by Victoria Smisek, or should I say Lady Victoria Smisek, because it looks like she's in a manor house. I've been assured that she's not.
I'm in my stately home residence. Yeah.
Exactly. So Vicky is the author of Falling Awake, A Heron's Journey, which was released last April 2021. And you're currently writing the next book.
Oh,
yeah. So that's,
we'll talk about that.
I'm sure we will. And I'm also joined by Tonia Gaudiuso, who is author of Permission to be Rich, which was out in November. Was it November?
Oh, yeah, October 28th.
Right at the end of October.
Yeah.
So yeah, quite recently out in the world. And I don't think you're writing another one, are you, at the moment?
Yeah.
There will be one in the works, but maybe not right now.
I've been told there is one, but I am, still enjoying not writing right now.
Yeah, enjoying the break. Oh, fantastic. Oh, and here comes Jennifer. So let's let Jennifer in. Oh, yay. So we were waiting. Jennifer. Oh, Jennifer, hi.
Hi.
We're streaming live already on Facebook, but I'm really glad you could join us and be part of this discussion. So Jennifer is one of our newest authors who signed with us towards the end of last year, and your book Wild Egg is going to be out this year.
It is.
just finalizing the manuscript for that, which is very exciting.
I am.
So welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you. Hi.
First appearance on Unbound Women. And like I said, what we're going to be talking about today is how to write your own book in 2022 and offering some insight around that. So I'm going to kick off and ask the question, if someone is watching this and feeling that call to write a book, what would you say to them?
I'll go.
Yeah, go on.
I would say go for it and absolutely jump on it. And that's why I feel like, your community is the best with being Unbound. It's you really don't have to have a formulated book or even know the outline of it. And which is what I love the whole process of what you do. I knew when I was writing my book, I didn't even know I wanted to write a book. It was just you're going to write a book about money, and it dropped in and I had no idea what it was going to be about. But it's sort of if there's this urge and there's something that's really calling to you and a voice that wants to be heard, this community is the best place to do it, because you kind of just let it write itself. And then before you know it, there's a book there. So I think I would say it's just follow the curiosity, and then it will show you the way. So you don't need to have it all figured out. If you just have an idea, that's enough.
And I just want to say, your process, Tonia, you made it sound really simple there. Before you know it, you have a book, and we're going to dive into that a bit more, because I know it wasn't quite like that for you, but thank you for making it sound so very simple.
Well, making the decision was doing it is something different.
Exactly. Yeah. Thanks, Tonia. Jennifer?
I'm just sitting smiling to myself because my process was so not like that. But I totally resonate, and I think it's great advice. And I think I spent, it's laughable really, about 15 or so years, like basically arguing with this idea that kept coming to me that no, I couldn't do it. It was a stupid idea. Who am I to do this? I mean, and it got to and I kept trying and then failing, and it literally got to a point where I sat down one day about 10 years ago and kind of begged this thing to leave me alone. I was like, I'm so sorry, but I just can't do this. You know, you're just going to go and have to find somebody else because I just can't do it, and I'm just not the right person. Go away, please. So eventually, though, I think I changed my mindset from it being this heavy thing of like, oh, it's this awful responsibility and why me, and you know, all of the barriers that kind of came up about that I wasn't good enough and I couldn't do it, and I couldn't, as you said, Tonia, I couldn't see how it was all going to work out. So I sort of almost defeated myself before I even began. And then I think I finally became curious and just playful with it and like lighter with it. So I think I got to a point like in lockdown of this idea kind of came again, and I was like, okay, like it was more like, okay, you want to play. So I was like, I've got no idea what you are. I don't really know what you're going to be, but okay, like I'm up for playing. And then as Tonia sort of said, I think what I learned to do instead of like trying to bash this thing into something that I was controlling, I just kind of like surrendered and was like, okay, I'll just go along for the ride and just kind of trust that this invitation is something that's going to be something that's going to bring me growth, something that's going to be interesting, and kind of let go of the idea that I've got to produce, you know, like a brilliant book that's going to change the world at the end of it. And I let go of all of that. And I think in the end, just like followed this thing, which kept morphing a lot. And so it was a kind of personal development book, then it was a memoir, then I'm like, oh, you're not either of those, you're a novel, okay. And I think the more that I like allowed it to sort of guide me and got out of the way, the more it kind of showed me itself, and then the more I kind of got to the point where I actually finally wrote a book. So yeah, I kind of learned what Tonia said, but I kind of learned the hard way, I think, by trying a long time to do it not that way.
Well, I'm sure many people, like I definitely resonate with that. It took me ages to actually make the decision to write my first book. And I love how you describe that once you did that, you know, and just like bringing in that playful quality and allowing it to evolve and become what it wanted to be. That's so kind of helpful, I think, for people to hear. Like you don't have to do it all at the beginning. So thanks, Jennifer. Thank you. Vicky, what about you?
Well, I can relate to both of those things, actually. I feel that actually when I wrote my first book, you know, it even feels weird even saying that, that I did just kind of get on with it, and it did just sort of happen, actually. But I really set up certain conditions when that to happen. I took myself off to writing retreat and then spent lots of time in Costa Rica writing, and you know, it did sort of all come together fairly sort of what to at the time felt quite surprisingly smoothly. And I mean, of course, that's not, you know, that's not the whole process by any means, but now I feel like I'm in a really different process where I'm sort of it's like that, you know, that difficult second album that, you know, and now I'm kind of like, oh, okay, oh, it's not just going to be really easy again. And I think, you know, because I already wrote one book, now the next one, sort of knowing what's involved, feels a bit harder somehow. I don't know why, but I'm really like what you said, Jennifer, about that playfulness. And you know, I think we can sort of fall into that trap of, well, it's a very serious business writing a book, you know, isn't it? You know, especially a book that's going to be really transformative, and especially with a tagline like you have, Nicola, with Unbound, like, you know, changing the world one book at a time. Oh,
yeah.
okay.
No pressure.
I'm just gonna, okay.
If it's not world changing, we're not
If
interested.
it's,
Yeah.
exactly. So it's really, you know, and all the ego gets involved and all that, of course. So yeah, that playfulness and that sort of just like, it doesn't really matter. And I think the things that were really helpful to me in you know, my process was this idea of just writing for myself first and foremost, and kind of pretending to myself that was it, you know, that was all I was doing and that was all I was ever going to do, because that way I wasn't censoring myself, and also I wasn't trying to be too kind of, you know, clever with what I was producing. And the other thing that was a real game changer for me was I'd heard the expression on a couple of writing retreats that I'd been on from another writing communities, this concept of the first shitty draft, which comes from Anne Lamott, yeah, with her brilliant book, Bird by Bird.
Yeah.
And that was a real, yeah, like I say, that was a game changer for me, because I thought, okay, it doesn't even have to be good. It can be shit. It can be I can just write something that's shit, and that's okay. And so that really helped me with that block of, is it going to be good enough? You know, am I good enough, essentially? Just write, you know, just write something and see what wants to come out. And this whole idea of us sort of being the kind of just the vessel for something from our higher selves, you know, or, you know, some kind of external to come through us. And so we just, like you say, we just have to get out of the way of that. So yeah, both those things really helpful for me, and it's really good for me to remember those things now as I kind of, you know, yeah. And that is secretly why I wanted to come on this call today, because I thought, right now I need to kind of remember actually how to, you know, how do I get myself back into this space now of writing another book, and you know, what have I forgotten? All so much that I learned along the way, and I feel like I've forgotten. So not only is it really, you know, it's a, you know, it's an honor to be able to share with anybody else who's vaguely interested about what we've learned, but also, you know, really good for me to remember that.
We all need to remember, really. I need to remember, because being in that beginner place, like, it can feel kind of scary and like, oh, how am I going to do this? But it's a really powerful place to be. And a lot of people say to me, well, I've never done it before, I've never written a book. And it's like, well, yeah, but that's amazing, right? Because then you get to find your own way of doing it. There's no preconceived ideas.
Beginner's mind.
Yeah, definitely. So the more we can plug back into that, the better. And I just want to say the piece about changing the world one book at a time. Yeah, we're definitely here for changing the world. But I think just making that decision to write your book, like, that changes your world, and the impact of that, it ripples out into the collective. So it happens on different levels.
Yeah,
there isn't really that pressure to actually change the world with your one book. But you know, you can if you like.
Yes, please.
Yeah. So how do each of you write? What is your process? Because I think people are interested in this. I always like to hear kind of what people's writing practice is like. Do you write by hand? Do you type? Like, how did you approach writing your books?
I feel like I had a sort of tapas approach, so I wouldn't say I did like one consistent thing. And I think I'd started off I think I definitely got myself in that place of, this is a book for my own processing. It's like a sense making journey for myself. And I started off writing, I think, kind of like a first chapter. And then I sort of started to sketch what like other things that were popping. So I think what I learned to trust, and I think it resonates with something Tonia was saying, is like, I didn't necessarily have, you know, I knew where it started. I always had that clear in my mind, but I didn't really know where it was going to end. And I didn't really know what was going to happen other than a very broad kind of arc. And I think I started to write the first sort of couple of chapters because I kind of knew the beginning bit. And then once it started to pick up a bit of energy, I love post-it notes. And I kind of had a big wall and I started just to write it was almost like potential jigsaw pieces. So I thought there's a piece that might be something to do with this and the piece that, and then I kept moving them around on the wall and thinking, does that go before that or this go before that? Till I had a very loose structure, I think. And then kind of I took each of the sort of segments and thought, well, if I go from roughly there to there, I would start writing. But I tried to do, I think, what Victoria was saying about just like writing rubbish and allow myself just to go blah, 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 and just sort of see what came out and trust that there's a shitty first draft stage and not to get in the trap of trying to edit as I was trying to do just the blah blah bit, because I think I used to do that, then start editing and then I would just get myself and one little technique that kind of kept me going, which I'm still doing now for editing, is literally something super simple called 17-minute sprints that I picked up from somebody else. And it's basically the idea of like sitting down, putting your timer on with the idea that like 17 minutes is kind of long enough to get in a flow, but it's short enough that you think you can always do 17 minutes. I mean, I can write for 17 minutes. Now I got into a habit of just like putting some music on. So I had a playlist of music. So there was a kind of anchor that every time I sat down, I put this same playlist on, which is all instrumental. So it's not too distracting. And I put my time on for 70 minutes and I would just do sprints. And then gradually it was like you just clock up these sprints. And then I got to a point where I was really trying to get it over the line because my deadline was the eve of my 50th birthday, which was a very compelling deadline. And when I got kind of closer towards that, I asked my coach to hold me accountable. So I would check in every Sunday and say, right, this week on Monday, I'm going to do, even some days it was like, I'm just going to do 3 sprints because I've got a really busy day. And then on other days, I'd be like, right, I'm going to go for 12 sprints. And I would just keep doing these tiny chunks that gradually, like, it was surprising how much it does sort of stack up, and it kind of made it feel more digestible than like thinking of, because I used to go, right, you've got to sit for 3 hours to read, and I just found I couldn't do it like that. And then I checked in and said, right, I managed to do this many, and then gradually I suddenly was like, I finished. And I finished at 9 p.m. on the eve of my 50th birthday. And I'm now doing sprints to edit as well, because I just find I can kind of keep my concentration for that length of time. And I just, for some sad reason, I like just put my little 5-bar gate of sprints, and then I'm like, oh, I'll just do another one because that'll make 10 today or 15 today. And I find that's really working for me.
I love that
technique. Yeah,
I love that, because I definitely work best in really short chunks of time. So I would set a timer, but I'd usually set it for like half an hour, but I'd never quite get to the half an hour. So I love 17 minutes. I think that would work really well for me. So thank you. Thanks, Jennifer.
Trying to remember actually, and I feel like it depended on the stage that I was at as well. Like early on, the goal was just to write. Like whatever was going to make me write is what I did. But I did find early on that I couldn't write on a computer. Something about it, because I'm used to journaling. Like I had my morning ritual, like I have my morning pages that I do. So like I had that morning practice. So I guess I was already used to just journaling. So I kind of took that and started to do that, where I'm like, I'm just journaling. Like similar to Jennifer, like I had a theme. Like I knew I was going to write a book about money, about what it is that I teach with my clients, but I had no idea what that was even going to look like, the format of it, or any of that. So I just gave myself permission to write. And it was just like, whatever story wants to come through in the mastermind, I'm like, all right, I have this period of time that I'm going to write. And if that's all the writing I did that week, then that's all the writing I did that week. And then sometimes I would take myself out on dates where I would just bring the notebook with me, and I would find myself in the city and at a coffee shop. And so, all right, here, I'll have a half hour, and I would make myself a date because I needed motivation in order to write. And so something like that really helped. And then as I started to write in the notebook, I then realized, like, I have no idea what is in my notebook. And then from that point, when I realized like I had a good amount, is when I decided to type it up. And then from there, the structure started to show itself, where I typed it up and then I would just read it back. And Jennifer, similar to you, like you did the Post-it notes, I have a picture of myself that I printed it all out and I just had it laid out all around me. And I just started to see a theme. I'm like, oh, I'm talking about my childhood. I'm like, oh, look, I'm talking about my relationship to money and how I always was kind of obsessed with money, and talking about how I formed, like, why am I so obsessed with it? And why do I love doing it? And, oh, so I'm going to be talking about my relationship with money first, and then going into what it is that I teach, and just taking all of the pages. And so I had like a little first, I had many manuscripts with my book and many pages of it. Each one revealed what was next. And I feel like there was so many layers to it that then at that point, I was able to start writing on the computer. And then I would start doing, I would have a ritual. Like I had Philip Glass on Spotify, and he's just piano. So at that point, it's like I almost built a stamina for myself in writing. So I'd be like, okay, for me, I needed a longer spurt of time to write, because once I was in the flow, I could keep going. And then that was it. So I would have Philip Glass on, and I would just sit there and I would just type away. But when I found myself not able to type, I would take a notepad. And if I was stuck, I was like, what do I want to write right now? And it's almost like I needed the notepad to boot me up again to get writing again on the computer. So it's sort of like, I feel like during different phases of your writing, you might go in and out of things, and just like having a little bit of a ritual or something to motivate yourself, I find is like super helpful too in doing the writing.
Brilliant. We need to start collating everyone's writing playlists, I think, and like have some Unbound writing playlists on Spotify or something. So
I listened to Philip ever since. Put him on a bike now, like, oh no.
yeah, you can't listen to it anymore.
He's associated to that book, and whenever 2 happens, it'll be a new playlist that happens.
Thanks, Tonia.
Yeah, I had I put together a playlist, but it wasn't so much a playlist that I would write to, but it was a playlist to help me get into more about the kind of the space and the focus of what I wanted to write about. So I knew that I was going to write a memoir, and so I put together a playlist of all the songs that I used to listen to, you know, as a teenager, as an early teenager and everything. And I would just put that on and I would just dance to it, and kind of, you know, that was about, I guess, taking myself back to that time of my life where I could, you know, sort of bring it back to life so that I could then transfer that onto paper. So the whole music thing and the whole movement thing really works well for me. And I'd forgotten that I'd done this actually, but listening to you both now talking, yeah, before I actually started writing, I think I was feeling quite blocked. I didn't really know, kind of had this ideas, but wasn't really too sure. And I got the idea from somewhere. I can't take credit for it myself, but I remember I just, a little bit like you were just saying, Tonia, I just spread all around me. I just got anything that was in any way related to any of the ideas that I had about what my book was going to be about. So, and I just spread it all out on the floor. So I had old photographs, I had old maps, I had sort of, you know, letters, any kind of memorabilia from my past. And then I, you know, and I wrote down sort of words on big cue cards and lots of colors and kind of, you know, and it was just, yeah, it took up the whole kind of room, the whole floor space. And I just sat there with it. And I didn't kind of, now I kept sort of thinking, well, you know, we're suddenly going to be filled with this absolute, like, yes, I've got it. And I'm going to be writing like a demon. It didn't happen like that at all. I kind of thought, like, okay, and now what, you know? But I just sat there with it and I took a photo of it, and I used to come back to that photo, and it was just about connecting with my creative self, I think. And so, you know, you mentioned the morning pages, Tonia, you know, yeah, absolutely. I did the artist way, worked through the artist way a few years ago, and then started writing my book sort of more or less on the back of finishing that. So having a regular morning pages practice was really, really helpful. And yeah, I pretty much wrote my whole book by hand. And then I sort of got into the practice of, I would write during the day in my journal. And yeah, really important, I think, to really separate the processes of writing and editing. They're entirely different things. And that's something that I really kind of learned along the way. And so I would write during the day in my journal, and then in the evening I would type up what I'd written that day, and then I would do a little bit of editing as I went along. And then sometimes I'd really get in the flow and I'd keep writing, and so there would be a sort of a gap, you know, in the journal for the bit, oh no, that bit went straight onto the computer. But I really, it works for me to write by hand. Definitely, I feel more connected to my kind of creative self that way.
Yeah.
I was just going to add one thing, if that's all right, which was prompted by something Tonia said about, I think I'm by nature, I'm a very structured person. And I think when I first started, I was always trying to be like, you know, and then I was doing it quite sequentially. So I kept trying to like pick up where I left off, and then, you know, and I got to a point where I kept getting stuck. And quite often I would fight, and think you might have mentioned about movement. So I would go on my bike or I'd go for a walk. And I started doing what I termed like jigsaw writing. So like I would just suddenly, like a bit of dialogue would come in my head, or like I would just sort of almost see like a scene played like a movie. And but I had a vaguest idea that might be over here in the book, even though I might be here. And so I would get home and I would just start writing. And I kind of got the point of saying to myself, I'm just going to trust that this may well be a scene or a something, and it might not be, but it kept the momentum going. And I kind of thought, I created a folder called Jigsaw Pieces. And I would just title whatever the thing was I wrote. Sometimes it could be quite short, sometimes quite long. And I just kept like dropping them into this folder. And then every now and again, I'd be like, I think that bit fits here. And it's like I sort of started to kind of almost assemble them. And then suddenly I would have a sort of spate where I would write sequentially again, and almost the pieces were just kind of fitting in. Then it would jump, and I kind of got used to the process of surrendering to go, and it'll just show me what it wants to show me. I'll let go of the fact that this is in an order I think it should be, and just trust that it's somehow they're all going to glue together at some point. And I think that was very freeing, because it just allowed me to kind of work with what was coming on that day or in that moment.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Jennifer. I think that's really important, because I feel we can get really jammed up when we have this expectation that we have to write our books in this linear way.
Yeah.
I know I can't do that. I need to jump around between different parts of my book. So yeah, thank you for coming back and sharing that. So interesting to hear about your different approaches. I mean, I have to write by hand initially as well, in order to connect and just allow what wants to come through, and have to kind of get quite a way into the process before I start typing it up. But a question that's come up over the last couple of days, somebody asked me, like, how long does it take to write a book? And it's like, well, how long? How long is a piece of string? I mean, honestly, but I'll be interested to hear for each of you how long it's taken. I know, Jennifer, you're still in kind of editing mode, but you're pretty much there.
Yeah.
So how long has each of your book writing journeys taken?
Well,
just need to write it down.
So it took me 6 months to write it and 6 months to edit it. That's very kind of roughly. It was pretty much within a year of starting, the first chapter. So I kind of wrote solidly for 6 months, and then I followed advice about this. So then I just left it. I just put it aside. I just put it away for a couple of months and didn't even look at it. And then I came back to it and spent the next few months editing it, and and then re-editing it, and then re-editing it, and so, but yeah, within maybe just over a year, within just over a year, I think it probably went to the design process and everything around about kind of February time or something, February, March time. Yeah.
What was it like having that couple of months break from it?
It was really useful, definitely. And the other thing that I wanted to add, actually, that was really, really made a huge difference to me, and I honestly don't know if I would have actually finished it, let alone gone ahead and got it published, if I hadn't done this, was as I was writing, I was sending what I was writing to two really good friends along the way, and they were giving me feedback and just really championing me to keep going, and just obviously they said really wonderful things because they're very good friends.
Because
it was just well, that as well. Yeah, but I certainly didn't I didn't necessarily believe that at the time. And then I extended as my confidence grew, and as I got to after I'd finished the first shitty draft, then I sent it to another couple of friends and got a little bit braver, and then I sent it to a couple of friends that weren't sort of on my immediate kind of circle of friends, a little bit friends that weren't exactly gonna see the world like I do. And that was massively helpful. So I think when I was kind of not touching it and not looking at it for a couple of months, there was still that process was still going on where friends were reading it and kind of so I was still engaged with it, but I deliberately, because what I found is I could keep editing this for another 2 years, and of course it's only actually what I wrote is really only relevant for that moment that I was in when I wrote that particular sentence, and looking at it 6 months later or a year later, I would write that completely differently. So I had to be quite disciplined actually about not over editing it, and just trusting that it needed to come out the way it needed to come out. And but yeah, the whole editing process was fascinating to me. I enjoyed that way more than I thought I would. I sort of went into that feeling like, oh God, sort of rewrites, and kind of someone sort of saying, oh well, it's back to the whole sort of school report, could be better, it's good, but and I was really resistant to it, but it wasn't like that at all. I learned loads, and I'm so glad that I went through that process. Has been really, really helpful. Yeah, brilliant. Because you have brilliant editors at Unbound Press.
Wow, they all love these books. They've got a real interest in the books that we are releasing, which I feel is really important. So, okay. Tonia, did you enjoy the editing process?
Which one? Like I wrote 2 books with this one.
Well, how long did it take?
2 years from like me saying yes to even writing a book to it being published. So
that's pretty amazing still.
Yeah, there was, but it's long. Well, I had also part of it is just expectations and wanting things on certain dates that I wanted it. And I feel like for me, my book kind of was like, for me not to be so disciplined. It was the discipline of writing every day and staying with the book. But if the book wanted more time, allowing that, because I can be in a space of discipline where I just want it out so that I could say that I got it done in the time frame that I wanted it, versus it being the best read for the reader and for the journey of the reader. And so for me, it was just constantly a journey of surrendering, releasing expectations, surrendering, saying the book is coming out. I think Vicky, you and I were doing we were
going to be synced. Yeah,
and it was April, and I think I had it done. And my book didn't come out till another 6 months now after that. And I think a lot of it had to do too is that I had like a teaching. Like I had my money methodology that I teach. So I have worksheets in there. And so it was almost like I had to edit the book as a story. And then it was like, oh, okay, and now how am I teaching it? And so once I had that edited, another layer came through. And it was like, well, it's not that clear. I need to show examples. And I had to go back and rewrite it as giving samples to people versus giving. So there was always a constant change in the book. And so I think for me, the biggest thing was the surrender piece and just allowing it. And I did do the same as Vicky, and I did have people read it. I think it was after my like first draft, just to see like, hey, and it was like really raw to be like, okay, do I even have something here? Will people even be interested? Is it because I'm so obsessed with money and I love doing this stuff, but is it really coming through? So that I could get that feedback and change it in direction where it's going to land. And so it was only 3 people, but it was a complete stranger and 2 of my friends. And then I got that feedback. And then from there, I think the first manuscript to like the second, I think I added like another 200 pages that I think I wrote in like 3 months. It was like insane just what decided to come through after that. So, you know, it's great to have a deadline, and if the book allows it, great. But it's also, I kind of feel like, you know, we don't get to control our books, but I do agree with Vicky. There is this, you can keep editing it. And I did reach a point where my book was like, hey, we're done. Like anything. And I had to make an agreement with myself where I was like, okay, anything more that I have to write, you're book number 2. Like you're not making the cut anymore. So voice, you could still be heard, but just not coming out right now. And so it started to do that where I had to make it, or else I could have been there forever. And every time I reread something, it was coming from the new perspective I had that day. And I'm like, no, this is new information. This has got to stop. Like, and so there does need to be an agreement made of like listening and realizing like, oh, okay, maybe I'm holding on because like, I'm a little afraid to have it go out into the world. And that's a whole other process of, you know, getting it out there and letting the words just be out there for people to enjoy. So yeah, that was, you know, my process of, as we said, my book had an encore. It just kept, it's not ready, I'm ready, I'm not ready, I'm ready. So it was quite the process of surrendering, but it was an amazing thing that I had to learn. So it was like still just the process in itself is just a transformative experience, besides whether what your book does, but what it does for, what it did for me as a person is beyond words, what it did.
Agree with that.
Yeah.
How about you, Jennifer? How long has your book?
Yeah, I was just trying to work it out. So mine has been 16 months in total. I was thinking about, I can remember very clearly the moment, the day that I got the download, because I'd taken part in a little pop-up writing group in lockdown, thinking that I was writing an entirely different book, which this is the one I've been kind of trying to write for like years and years. I thought, right, I'm ready, have another crack at it. And I literally had this moment where I was on my bicycle, actually kind of going along thinking about it. And out of nowhere, it felt like something turned my head. And I was thinking about this idea that was to do with a lighthouse keeper, blah, 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 blah. And it was literally like I felt something. It was the weirdest thing, sort of like turned my head like this. And I just went, wild egg? What? I was like, what's wild egg? And then I was like, and then literally the next thing was like, you know, it's about like a woman, about your journey, about becoming child free. And I was like, oh God, that's what I'm writing. I was like, oh, right, okay. And then like it just sort of started, the idea kind of started coming. So I spent 8 months where I thought I was writing a memoir. So I'd written quite a lot of it, and then a lot of it was all sketched out because it was my story. So I had kind of a lot of written and then like a kind of sketch of where it was going to go. I was encouraged to go and approach publishers. So I thought I went to an agent who also does a bit of consultancy and kind of, you pay a bit of money, they'll read a kind of sample of your chapters and a pitch and give you feedback. So I got that from this lady, and she basically said, you've definitely got something here. It's a really relevant topic, you know, the writing's good, but can I give you some advice? I really, really would strongly advise you to write this as a novel. I think you've got a novelist's kind of sensibility, and I think the way you write characters would be more powerful as a novel. So I was like, right, okay. So I thought, Oh, okay. So I sat and thought about it for a bit and thought, well, that's scary, because the idea to me of like, I thought it's scary enough to write your own kind of experience, but I thought, well, at least I know what the story is. I was like, a novel. And then I kind of thought, well, if I'm going to trust the process, if this is what it wants to be, and I suppose it gives you more scope for creativity. Okay, then I'll give it a go. And then I kind of had this weird period where I kept sort of started off going, okay, it's a novel. How do I do that then? And then I kind of did a bit, and then I was like, no, it's not. It's a memoir. And it kind of flip-flopped. So I got to a stage where I was sort of half writing memoir, and then another day I'd write novel. And I thought, do you know what? I'm just going to keep going till it makes its mind up what it wants to do. Then it kind of got to a certain point where it felt like it was like, yes, I'm a novel. So I was like, okay. Then I think that whole process has taken me 8 months to then, so effectively I've rewritten all of the stuff I originally wrote, and then changed quite significantly what I thought I was going to do. And it's taken 8 months, but a bit like Victoria said, in amongst that time, I had somebody that was kind of reading sections and giving me feedback. So I did do a bit of editing where I had I finished a draft, like a shitty draft bit, and then I would leave that for a while, then I would kind of get feedback and go back to another bit. So I kind of had things running in parallel, but I think now the edit, and I've left it for probably 2 months. Now I'm trying to do major editing, which I'm enjoying, but I think I'm finding it, this is where I probably need help from your team, because I think I'm feel intuitively like it needs to be cut down a bit, but I'm struggling to know what to take out.
Yeah,
because I think you get quite close to it, and I think I'm finding that hard. So I can edit down like sentences when I read them out loud, and I think it's a bit clunky, but I think probably I need to take chunks out, and I don't think I've probably been bold enough to just go, that needs to come out. So I think that's where I probably need a bit of help. But so I guess the editing process has taken me a couple of months, because I'll be done by this end of this week.
Amazing. Amazing. Yeah. Jennifer. And yeah, absolutely. We can get so close to our own writing that it can be helpful to get somebody else, especially if you're going to be wanting to cut bits out. So definitely help with that. Oh my goodness, this subject, we could talk about it all day, I think, but we're coming up towards the end. There's been loads of kind of juicy nuggets in there. I've kind of taken some inspiration. So thank you to each of you. Before we go, how can people find out about what you do, and how can they connect with you? What's the best way for them to do that? Go first.
The only way that people can connect with me.
Keep it simple.
Keep it simple, is through my website. I've come off all social media, not that I did very much of it anyway, but I'm really, really happy and really lined up with that decision to do that. And so through my website, which is victoriasmisek.com. That's it.
Yeah, perfect.
I like it. So
take it or leave it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I have the best way to get in touch with me is through my website, which is toniag.com. And on there, I talk about how I work with people with money. And also my book is on there if anyone is interested in, giving themselves permission to be rich. So it's all there.
That's a good line.
It is.
This is all for me to concentrate on as soon as I finish the editing, but at the minute, probably the best way on Instagram at wildegg21. That's where I've been a bit quiet recently, but I'm going to get back onto that soon.
Brilliant. And we're looking forward to your book coming out later in the year.
Yeah, me too.
I love the title.
Thank
you.
Great title.
Can't wait. So thank you so much for joining me today for this discussion, this episode of Unbound Women. We will be back next month with another episode. And just to say, if somebody's watching this and feeling the call to write a book in 2022, we do have the Unbound Book Incubator, which starts next week. I think Vicky's joining us for that. crazy. Like a really amazing group of magical beings are gathering already for that. So if you want to be part of it, I'll pop the link below this video so you can take a look and come join us over there. But thanks,
Great.
everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Lovely to meet you, Victoria and Tonia, as well.
You too.
Good luck with the editing.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you.